The emergency lights flashed red across the massive council chamber aboard Harmony's Edge, the largest space station ever built. Representatives from 43 different alien species sat in their special chairs, breathing different gases and speaking through translators that turned their words into the common galactic language. Ambassador Zethkara stood at the center podium. Her crystal body caught the light and threw rainbows across the chamber walls. The Vithari were known for being calm and logical, but today her voice shook with fear. "My fellow council members," she began, her words echoing in the vast space. "We face complete destruction. The Devourers have returned." A wave of terrified whispers filled the chamber. The Devourers were nightmare stories told to young aliens, ancient machines that ate entire worlds and turned living beings into twisted metal and flesh monsters. Everyone believed they were just legends. 3 months ago, we lost contact with the Outer Rim colonies, Zethkara continued. We sent investigation teams. None returned. Then our deep space sensors detected something moving toward the inner systems. The main viewing screen lit up with images that made several aliens cover their optical organs. Planets stripped down to bare rock. Space stations twisted into impossible shapes. Ships that looked like they were made from bones and metal growing together. "They are not the same enemy we faced 10,000 years ago," said General Korask of the Insectoid Hive Collective. His 6 arms clicked nervously. "They learn from every battle. They adapt. Our weapons work once, maybe twice, then become useless." Admiral Veltar of the gas-dwelling Nephilim floated in his containment sphere, his jellyfish-like body pulsing with distress colors. "We have lost 300 ships in the last month alone. Every time we engage them, they copy our tactics and use them against us." The chamber fell silent as the military leaders presented their reports. Battle after battle showed the same pattern. The combined galactic fleets would attack with their best strategies. They might win the first engagement, but the Devourers would return days later, using the same tactics but better, faster, deadlier. "Our computers cannot predict their movements," admitted Dr. Zeline, the Coraxis hive mind's greatest strategic intelligence. "They do not follow standard military logic. They make decisions that seem random but prove effective." Zethkara's crystal form dimmed with exhaustion. "We need soldiers who think differently, warriors who can be unpredictable, fighters who embrace chaos instead of order." The council members looked at each other with growing understanding and horror. "You cannot be suggesting," began Ambassador Threx of the Peaceful. "Altarians, I am," Zethkara said firmly. "We need humans." The reaction was immediate. Some aliens stood up shouting. Others made sounds of disgust. A few simply left the chamber entirely. "Humans are barbarians," cried Representative Oolon. "They have been denied full council membership for good reasons. They solve every problem with violence. They fight wars for entertainment," added another voice. "They create weapons designed specifically to cause suffering. They eat other living creatures." Someone else shouted. Zethkara waited for the noise to die down. "Yes," she said quietly. "They do all of those things. That is exactly why we need them." She activated the viewing screen again. This time it showed human military records that the Council had been studying in secret. Videos of human soldiers in combat situations that would break the minds of most civilized species. "Look at these records," she said. "Humans fighting against impossible odds and winning. Humans using tactics that make no logical sense but achieve victory. Humans who continue fighting even when they should surrender." The screen showed human soldiers on a dozen different worlds. They fought with captured alien weapons when their own broke. They used the environment as a weapon, collapsing buildings and redirecting rivers to defeat enemies. They fought in conditions that would kill most other species and somehow survived. They have been fighting wars continuously for their entire recorded history, General Korask admitted grudgingly. Their planet has produced more military innovations in the last 1,000 years than the rest of the galaxy combined. Because they never stopped trying to kill each other more efficiently, Admiral Veltar observed. "Exactly," Zethkara said. "And now we need that efficiency turned against the Devourers." The Council's chief military strategist, an ancient being known only as the Calculator, spoke for the first time. Its voice came from everywhere at once, as if the station itself was talking. "Analysis confirms. Conventional military thinking has failed. Predictable strategies result in defeat. The enemy adapts too quickly for standard approaches. Probability of success using current methods, less than 2%. The chamber fell silent again. Probability of success using human military advisors, unknown. Human combat methods cannot be accurately predicted by our models. This unpredictability may be advantageous against an adaptive enemy. Representative Ulan stood up again. And what happens after the war? Assuming these humans somehow save us. Do you think they will simply go back to their little corner of space and leave us alone? That is a problem for tomorrow, Zethkara replied. Today we face extinction. She looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. Some were brave warriors who had fought in a dozen conflicts. Others were peaceful beings who had never seen violence outside of entertainment programs. All of them were terrified. We kept humans out of the council because we feared what they might do to galactic civilization, she said. But if we lose this war, there will be no civilization left to protect. The vote was called. 43 species cast their ballots electronically. The result appeared on the main screen. 22 votes in favor, 18 against, 3 abstentions. The motion passes, announced the calculator. Official request for military assistance will be transmitted to Earth immediately. As the council members filed out of the chamber, many of them avoided looking at the images still playing on the screen. Videos of human soldiers doing things that violated every principle of civilized warfare, using psychological warfare that broke enemy minds before the first shot was fired. Adapting to alien environments and alien enemies with frightening speed. Admiral Veltar floated near Zethkara as she gathered her materials. "Do you really think this will work?" he asked. She looked at the final image on the screen. A single human soldier standing in the ruins of an alien fortress, surrounded by the bodies of creatures 3 times his size, still fighting despite wounds that should have killed him hours ago. "I think," she said slowly, "that we are about to discover why humans terrify everyone who meets them. And I pray to my ancestors that they terrify the Devourers more than they terrify us." The transmission to Earth would take 6 standard hours to arrive. In that time, 3 more colony worlds would go silent and the Devourers would move 1 step closer to the galaxy's heart. But for the first time in months, some members of the Galactic Council dared to hope. They had asked for soldiers. Soon they would discover what humanity considered its soldiers to be. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the communications room deep beneath the Swiss mountains, reading the message from the Galactic Council for the 3rd time. 26 years of military service had taught her to keep a straight face in any situation, but this was testing her limits. "Ma'am?" asked Colonel Rodriguez, her aide. "Your orders?" Chen set down the tablet and looked out through the reinforced windows at the Terran Defense Force Command Center. Hundreds of officers worked at their stations, monitoring Earth's defenses and the small human colonies scattered across nearby star systems. "They want our help," she said quietly. "The same aliens who told us we were too violent for their precious council. Too unpredictable, too dangerous." She picked up the message again and read the key paragraph aloud. "The Galactic Council formally requests the assistance of Earth's most disciplined military units to aid in the defense against the Devourer threat. We require soldiers who can adapt to unconventional warfare scenarios." Colonel Rodriguez frowned. "Disciplined military units? Ma'am, do they understand what they're asking for?" Chen smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "No, Rodriguez. They don't. They think they want our regular army. Nice, neat formations following standard galactic military protocols." She walked to her command console and entered her authorization codes. Red lights flashed as the system confirmed her identity. "Activate Protocol Omega," she said. Rodriguez's eyes went wide. "Ma'am, are you sure?" "Omega protocols are for extreme circumstances only. Colonel, the galaxy is about to learn why humanity has been in a constant state of war for 5,000 years, and why we're still here despite everyone trying to kill us. Across Earth and the human colonies, secure communication systems activated, but these messages did not go to regular military bases. They went to much darker places. The first signal reached the Titan station, orbiting the gas giant Saturn. Once a mining facility, it now served as headquarters for the Ghosts, former Special Forces soldiers who had been declared dead by their own governments. Men and women who had done things in the shadows that regular armies could not. Captain Marcus Voss read his orders while sitting in the captain's chair of his ship, the Blood and Thunder. The vessel looked like it had been through several wars, which it had. Patches of alien metal covered holes in the hull. The weapons were a mix of human and stolen alien technology. "Crew meeting," he announced over the ship's communication system. "Conference room, 5 minutes." His team gathered around the metal table that dominated the small room. They were not the kind of people most civilizations would call soldiers. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been thrown out of the Xenobiology Institute for conducting experiments that violated every ethical guideline. She was brilliant, ruthless, and knew more about alien anatomy than anyone else in human space. Kai Nakamura was covered in traditional Yakuza tattoos and carried more weapons than most people would think possible. He had joined Voss's crew after his criminal organization was destroyed in a territorial war. He specialized in making things explode in creative ways. Sergeant Maria Santos sat quietly in the corner, cleaning a rifle that had killed more aliens than most people had ever seen. Her entire unit had been slaughtered by alien pirates. She had survived for 3 days alone on a hostile planet before rescue arrived. She never talked about what she had done during those 3 days, but the pirates never attacked human colonies again. "Ladies and gentlemen," Voss began, "we have received a formal request for assistance from the Galactic Council." The room fell silent. Then Nakamura started laughing. "The same council that called us dangerous primitives last year?" he asked. "The ones who said humans should be quarantined for the safety of civilized species?" "The very same," Voss confirmed. "It seems they have a problem that their civilized species cannot solve." He activated the room's display screen and showed them the intelligence reports about the Devourers. Images of consumed worlds and twisted biomechanical creatures filled the screen. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward, studying the data with scientific interest. "Fascinating. They're not just destroying organic matter, they're repurposing it, converting living beings into components of their technology. Seems like the kind of enemy that regular tactics won't work against," Santos observed, never looking up from her rifle. "Exactly," Voss said, "which is why Admiral Chen has activated Protocol Omega. We're not going as advisors or support troops. We're going as ourselves." Similar meetings were taking place across human space. On the prison colony of Tartarus, the worst criminals in human custody were being offered a choice: die in their cells or earn redemption fighting aliens that wanted to eat the galaxy. At the Broken Wings facility on Mars, veterans who had been declared unfit for normal society were being offered one last mission. These were soldiers who had seen too much war to fear death, who had nothing left to lose. The message went to mercenary companies operating in the lawless frontier regions, to pirates who preyed on alien shipping, to researchers who had been banned from civilized space for pursuing knowledge that others considered too dangerous. Back on Earth, Admiral Chen watched the reports come in as her people prepared to deploy. The Galactic Council expected human soldiers to arrive in clean uniforms, following standard procedures, working within their chain of command. Instead, they would get humanity's monsters, the people that even humans preferred to keep locked away or operating in the shadows. "Ma'am," Colonel Rodriguez said quietly, "are we sure this is wise? Some of these people, they're dangerous to anyone around them, including allies." Chen nodded slowly. "Rodriguez, the galaxy has spent centuries trying to civilize warfare. Rules of engagement, protection of non-combatants, honorable surrender, proportional response, all very civilized." She gestured to the tactical displays showing the spread of the Devourer threat. "But civilization is not going to win this war. The aliens tried civilization, and they're losing entire star systems. The first human ships were already launching from hidden bases. They did not form neat formations or follow standard departure procedures. Some looked barely spaceworthy. Others were clearly modified alien vessels taken as prizes of war. We're sending them what they asked for," Chen continued. "Soldiers who can adapt to unconventional warfare. Fighters who don't follow predictable patterns. Warriors who will do whatever it takes to win." She paused, watching a particularly ugly ship limp out of Earth's orbit. The crew had painted skulls on the hull and written messages in languages that would get them arrested on most civilized worlds. "The galaxy wanted our help," she said finally. "They're about to learn that humans don't fight wars the way civilized species do. We don't fight to win battles or capture territory or achieve political objectives." Colonel Rodriguez looked confused. "Then why do we fight, ma'am?" Admiral Chen's smile was cold and sharp. "We fight to make sure the other side regrets starting the war in the first place." The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Xerian system, like a pack of hungry wolves arriving at a battlefield. Commander Veltar of the Nephilim Third Fleet watched their approach with growing confusion and horror. The alien ships maintained perfect formations, their hulls gleaming with advanced armor and energy shields. Their movements followed centuries of military tradition, each vessel in its assigned position, ready to execute coordinated battle plans. The human ships looked like they had been welded together from scrap metal and held together with hope and violence. They broke formation immediately upon arrival, scattering in directions that made no tactical sense. Some headed straight for the battle zone, others seemed to be running away. A few simply disappeared entirely, using stealth systems that violated several galactic treaties. "What are they doing?" asked Subcommander Kelrix, studying the tactical displays with his multiple eyes. "This cannot be their battle plan." Commander Veltar's jellyfish-like body pulsed with stress colors. "Perhaps humans have different tactical doctrines than we understand." On the bridge of the Blood and Thunder, Captain Voss watched the alien fleet through his ship's sensors. Neat rows of identical vessels, all following the same approach vector, all broadcasting their positions and intentions according to galactic military protocol. "Elena," he called to Dr. Vasquez, who was studying scanner readings at the science station. "What do you see?" The xenobiologist looked up from her displays, her eyes bright with scientific curiosity. "The Devourers have been fighting these aliens for 3 months, long enough to learn their patterns. Look at this." She transferred her readings to the main screen. The Devourer ships were already moving to counter the alien fleet's approach, positioning themselves exactly where standard galactic tactics would dictate the attack would come. "They know what the aliens are going to do before the aliens do it," she said. "Because the aliens always do the same thing." Voss smiled grimly. "Good thing we're not aliens. Santos, take us to that space station. The one that's half-eaten." Sergeant Santos looked up from the weapons console. "Sir, that station is crawling with Devourers, and according to the alien reports, anyone who goes inside doesn't come back out." "Which is exactly why we're going," Voss replied. "Kai, prep the boarding gear. Elena, bring your medical kit and whatever cutting tools you think we'll need." The Blood and Thunder peeled away from the main battle and headed for Zirion Station. Once it had been a beautiful structure, all curves and flowing lines that housed 50,000 beings. Now it looked like someone had tried to rebuild it using bones and metal cables. The alien fleets engaged the Devourers in the traditional manner, coordinated volleys of energy weapons, textbook flanking maneuvers, professional military operations that would have earned high marks in any academy. The Devourers responded with the same tactics, but executed them better. They had learned from 3 months of fighting these same enemies and improved upon everything they had stolen. Human vessel Blood and Thunder, came a transmission from the alien fleet. "You are approaching a contaminated zone. Withdraw immediately." Voss opened a channel. "Negative alien command. We're going aboard that station." "Impossible. The station has been compromised by Devourer conversion protocols. All organic matter inside has been processed into their biomechanical constructs." "Sounds like exactly the kind of place we need to visit," Voss replied, then cut the transmission. The Blood and Thunder docked with the station using magnetic clamps and plasma cutters. The outer hull had been changed into something that looked organic, with veins of metal running through flesh-like material that pulsed with its own heartbeat. Voss's team suited up in full combat gear. Their equipment was a mix of human military hardware and alien technology that had been modified in ways that would make engineers weep. Nothing matched, but everything worked. They cut through the station's outer hull and immediately found themselves in what had once been a residential area. The walls were covered in a growth that looked like coral made from metal and meat. Tubes ran along the ceiling, pumping fluids that glowed with sickly light. "Fascinating," Dr. Vasquez said, taking readings with her scanners. "They're not just converting organic matter. They're integrating it with their technology, creating hybrid systems." They moved deeper into the station, following the emergency lighting that somehow still functioned. Bodies hung from the walls in various stages of conversion, partly metal and partly flesh, with cables running through them like veins. Sergeant Santos studied them with professional interest. "They're still alive. Parts of them, anyway. I can see neural activity on my scanner." That's when they heard the voices. "Help. Us." The words came from speakers that had grown out of what used to be an information kiosk. "Please. And this." The voice was made up of hundreds of different beings, all speaking at once. The converted crew of the station, their minds linked together into a network that the Devourers used for communication and processing. Dr. Vasquez stopped walking and started taking detailed scans. This is incredible. They've created a biological computer network using the nervous systems of their victims. Can we use it? Voss asked. She looked at him with surprise. Use it? Captain, these are the minds of 50,000 sentient beings twisted into serving as components in an alien machine. Most species would consider even studying this to be a war crime. Most species are losing this war, Voss pointed out. Can we use it? Dr. Vasquez was quiet for a long moment, her scientific curiosity warring with the remains of her conscience. Curiosity won. Yes, she said finally. If we can access their network, we can learn how they coordinate their attacks. Maybe even send false information. They found the station's central core, where the conversion process had been completed. The entire chamber was lined with beings who had been integrated into the station's systems. Their eyes still moved, tracking the humans as they entered. Nakamura set up his explosives while Dr. Vasquez connected her equipment to the biological network. The sensation was immediately horrifying. Thousands of minds crying out in pain and desperation, begging for death. But buried in that ocean of suffering was tactical information. Fleet movements, attack plans, the location of other Devourer facilities. Got it, she said, unplugging her equipment with shaking hands. I know where they're going to strike next. Sergeant Santos looked at the walls full of converted beings. What about them? Voss considered for a moment. In the alien fleets, there would be debates about the ethics of ending their suffering. Committees would form to study the situation. Philosophers would argue about the nature of consciousness and the right to die. Kai, he said simply, light it up. The explosions that destroyed Zerion Station could be seen from the alien fleet. Commander Veltar watched in shock as the humans eliminated a strategic asset that could have been studied or possibly even reclaimed. Why would they destroy valuable intelligence? Subcommander Kelrix asked. Before anyone could answer, the Devourer fleet began to break formation. Their coordinated attacks faltered as false information flowed through their network. Ships that should have been attacking the alien left flank suddenly found themselves isolated and vulnerable. For the first time in 3 months, the aliens won a decisive victory. The humans, Commander Veltar said slowly, they used the station's network against the Devourers. They turned their own system into a weapon. But they had to destroy it to make it work, Kelrix observed. They sacrificed everything they could have learned from studying it. In the wreckage of Zerion Station, the Blood and Thunder began its journey back to the fleet. On the bridge, Captain Voss reviewed Dr. Vasquez's intelligence reports while Sergeant Santos cleaned Devourer biomatter off her equipment. Sir, she said quietly, those beings we destroyed, they were innocent victims, Voss nodded. Yes, they were. And they were also weapons being used against us. In war, sometimes there are no good choices, only necessary ones. The alien fleet sent congratulations on their tactical success, but the messages carried undertones of horror at human methods. They had asked for help against an unconventional enemy. They were beginning to understand that humans had their own definition of conventional warfare. The war changed after Zerion Station. News of the human victory spread through galactic communication networks faster than the military reports. Desperate star systems that had been preparing evacuation plans suddenly began requesting human assistance. Captain Voss found himself aboard the Vithari flagship Crystal Harmony, trying to explain guerrilla tactics to beings made of living crystal who had never encountered the concept of dishonorable combat. You want us to pretend to retreat? Asked war singer Thexidal, her crystalline form chiming with confusion. To show weakness when we are strong? This violates every principle of warrior honor. Voss gestured to the tactical display showing the approaching Devourer fleet. Honor won't help you when they've adapted to every strategy you've used for the last 1,000 years. The Vithari had fought wars before, but always according to ancient traditions. Challenges were issued. Terms were agreed upon. Battles were conducted with formal rules that both sides respected. It was civilized warfare, elegant and predictable. Watch, Voss said, activating a recording from the last Vithari engagement with the Devourers. Your fleet approaches in traditional diamond formation. You issue the ritual challenge. You wait for acknowledgement before attacking. The Crystal Warriors watched their own tactical recordings with growing dismay. The Devourers had been ready for every move, every formation, every strategy. They had learned to mimic Vithari honor codes to lure ships into perfect ambush positions. They are using our honor against us, war singer Mexvala realized, her harmonic voice dropping to a low, angry frequency. Exactly, Voss confirmed. So we need to give them something they can't predict, something that doesn't follow any pattern they can learn. Training the Vithari was like trying to teach poetry to rocks. Their entire culture was based on crystalline perfection, geometric precision, harmonic resonance. The idea of random, chaotic behavior was almost impossible for them to understand. But they learned, because the alternative was extinction. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, other human teams were spreading their particular brand of tactical education. Sergeant Santos worked with the Hive Collective, teaching insectoid warriors who thought as a single mind how to break their formations and act as individuals. It went against millions of years of evolutionary programming. But desperation was a powerful teacher. You cannot all attack the same target at the same time, she explained to a cluster of confused Coraxis drones. When you do that, the Devourers know exactly where to aim their weapons. You need to spread out, act unpredictably. The drones clicked their mandibles nervously. Acting without the coordination of the hive mind felt like death to them. But actual death was approaching fast, and fear proved to be an excellent motivator. Dr. Vasquez had established a mobile laboratory aboard a converted asteroid, where she studied samples of Devourer technology recovered from destroyed ships. The aliens had been trying to understand the enemy for months without success. The problem, she explained to a joint council of alien scientists, is that you've been approaching this like a research project. Taking samples, running tests, publishing papers for peer review. The assembled scientists, beings from a dozen different species, looked confused by her criticism. This is proper scientific methodology, protested Dr. Helix of the Altarian Science Council. How else would one study an unknown phenomenon? Dr. Vasquez smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. You study it like you're at war with it. She activated a holographic display showing her latest experiments. The alien scientist recoiled in horror. Instead of careful analysis and controlled testing, she had been deliberately trying to cause failures in Devourer technology, poisoning their conversion processes, creating hybrid infections that turned their own systems against them. This is not science, whispered a Nephilim researcher. This is weaponization of knowledge. Yes, Dr. Vasquez agreed. And it's working. Her research had revealed something crucial. The Devourers relied on biological imperatives hardwired into their conversion systems. They couldn't adapt beyond certain limits without losing the ability to process organic matter. Those limits could be exploited, but the methods required to exploit them violated every principle of ethical scientific research. Dr. Vasquez had been creating hybrid viruses using the neural tissue of partially converted victims. She had been deliberately causing pain to test emotional response triggers. She had been experimenting on living subjects in ways that made even hardened soldiers uncomfortable. The alien scientists were horrified, but they couldn't argue with her results. Her weaponized research was producing breakthroughs that proper scientific methodology had failed to achieve. The turning point came during the Battle of Nexus Prime, where Devourer forces had surrounded the system's main industrial planet. The combined galactic fleet arrived to find the enemy had prepared perfect defensive positions based on standard attack patterns, but the fleet that emerged from hyperspace was no longer. Standard Vithari ships approached in formations that changed randomly every few minutes. Instead of the traditional diamond pattern, they flew in shapes that had no mathematical logic. Their war songs had been replaced with human music, chaotic noise that the Devourers couldn't analyze for tactical information. Coraxis drones broke away from their hive formations and attacked individual targets from unexpected angles. They had learned to act without the coordination that had defined their species for millions of years. Nephilim vessels used their fluid forms to create ship configurations that had never been seen before, constantly shifting shape to prevent the enemy from learning their capabilities. At the center of the fleet, human ships coordinated the chaos. They had become the conductors of a symphony of controlled disorder. The battle lasted 18 hours. For the first time since the war began, the Devourers showed signs of genuine confusion. Their adaptive systems couldn't process the random tactics being used against them. Every time they began to understand a pattern, the pattern changed. Captain Voss watched from the bridge of the Blood and Thunder as alien ships executed maneuvers that would have been considered insane months earlier. A Vithari cruiser deliberately rammed a Devourer installation, something that violated every principle of Crystal Warrior honor, but proved devastatingly effective. "They're learning," Sergeant Santos observed, watching Caraxes fighters scatter in impossible directions. "Learning to fight dirty. Learning to fight like humans," Voss corrected. But victory came at a cost. The psychological toll on alien crews was enormous. Species that had fought honorable wars for centuries were now using tactics that made them question their own nature. After the battle, war singer Thexdal approached Voss privately. Her crystal form had developed stress fractures that would take months to heal. "Your methods are effective," she admitted, "but they are changing us. We are becoming something different from what we were." Voss nodded slowly. "War does that. The question is whether you want to change or whether you want to be extinct." She was quiet for a long moment, her crystalline body singing a low, mournful harmony. "I do not know if we will recognize ourselves when this war is over," she said finally. "Maybe that's the point," Voss replied. "Maybe the galaxy you're trying to save isn't worth saving if it can't adapt when survival is at stake." Dr. Vasquez's latest report arrived while they were talking. She had successfully created a viral weapon that could exploit the Devourer's conversion systems. But the weapon was so morally questionable that several alien species were refusing to authorize its use. "It requires living test subjects," she explained in her transmission. "Specifically, beings who have been partially converted by the Devourers. We have to deliberately cause them additional suffering to refine the weapon's effectiveness." The alien council members who received the report were split. Some argued that such methods were identical to what the Devourers themselves did. Others pointed out that without the weapon, their entire civilization would be extinct within months. The humans had no such moral qualms. "Deploy it," Admiral Chen ordered from Earth. "Do whatever is necessary to end this threat." As news of the new weapon spread through the fleet, alien crew members began to understand the true cost of accepting human help. They were winning the war, but they were losing something else in the process. The galaxy that emerged from this conflict would be very different from the one that had entered it. Whether that was evolution or corruption remained to be seen. The final battle began in the Nexus Void, a region of space so empty that most species avoided it entirely. The Devourers had chosen it as the location for their primary conversion nexus, a massive structure that looked like a metallic cancer growing in the darkness between stars. Captain Voss stood on the bridge of the Blood and Thunder, watching the largest fleet in galactic history assemble for what everyone knew would be a suicide mission. Ships from 43 different species floated in formations that would have been impossible to imagine when the war began. Vithari, crystal ships, sang war songs that mixed their traditional harmonies with human death metal. Caraxes hive ships moved in patterns that followed no logic except chaos. Nephilim vessels flowed through space like living things, changing shape every few seconds to avoid pattern recognition. And scattered throughout the fleet were human ships, looking like scrap metal held together with anger and determination. They would lead the final assault. "All ships," came the voice of Admiral Veltar over the fleet communications. "We go to die today, but our deaths will mean the Devourers die with us." The plan was simple in concept and terrifying in execution. Dr. Vasquez's viral weapon had been loaded into a single torpedo that had to be delivered directly to the Nexus core. But the core was protected by layers of converted biomechanical defenses that would destroy any ship that approached. So they would send every ship. "Remember," Voss addressed his crew, "we're not trying to survive this. We're trying to make sure the torpedo gets through. Everything else is secondary." Sergeant Santos checked her weapons one final time. After months of fighting alongside aliens, she had developed a grudging respect for some of them. But she had also seen what the Devourers did to captured beings, and death in battle was preferable to conversion. "Sir," she said quietly, "it's been an honor serving with you." Voss nodded. "Likewise, Sergeant. Try to take a few of them with you." The attack began with a coordinated assault that would have made military academies weep for its tactical impossibility. Instead of focusing on key targets or trying to preserve forces for follow-up attacks, every ship in the fleet charged directly at the Nexus. It was exactly the kind of strategy that should have resulted in total annihilation. Which was why it worked. The Devourers had learned from hundreds of battles against civilized military forces. Their defensive systems were designed to counter logical attacks, flanking maneuvers, strategic retreats, and tactical regrouping. They were not prepared for the entire enemy fleet to simply charge at them, with no regard for casualties or tactical advantage. They're not adapting fast enough. Dr. Vasquez reported from her position in the ship's laboratory. Their systems are trying to process too many random variables at once. The first wave of ships died within minutes, torn apart by weapons that converted their crews into additional defensive systems. But their deaths created gaps in the Nexus defenses that the second wave exploited. Bethari, crystal ships shattered into millions of sharp fragments that continued to damage enemy systems, even after their destruction. Carax's vessels split into smaller units that swarmed through the defensive perimeter like angry insects. Human ships used ramming tactics that violated every principle of space combat. They didn't try to disable enemy weapons or capture strategic positions. They just crashed into whatever looked important and exploded. "Torpedo away," announced Nakamura from the weapons console. The viral weapon had been launched from a Nephilim vessel that dissolved into component particles immediately after firing. The torpedo moved through the chaos of battle, its human-designed guidance system following a flight path that made no mathematical sense. It dodged defensive fire not through sophisticated maneuvering but by flying in directions that defied physics and logic. Captain Voss watched it approach the Nexus core through the ship's sensors, knowing that his crew's survival depended on that single weapon reaching its target. Around them, the galaxy's greatest fleet was destroying itself to create a path for one torpedo. "Impact in 30 seconds, Santos reported. The blood and thunder shook as Devourer weapons found their range. The ship's hull was breaching in a dozen places, atmosphere bleeding into space through gaps that the damage control systems couldn't seal. 20 seconds. Half the fleet was gone now, reduced to debris and bodies that floated in the void. The survivors continued their charge, using the wreckage of their own ships as cover. 10 seconds. The Nexus Core's final defensive systems activated, filling space with energy beams that could cut through any known material. Ships died by the dozens, their crews converted into additional weapons even as they fired their final shots. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. The viral weapon struck the Nexus Core and penetrated its outer shell before detonating. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the core began to change. Dr. Vasquez's weapon was a masterpiece of weaponized biology. It didn't just destroy Devourer systems, it turned them against each other. The virus spread through their conversion networks like fire through dry grass, causing every connected system to attack its neighbors. "It's working," Dr. Vasquez reported, her voice filled with scientific triumph and moral horror. The cascade effect is spreading through their entire network. The Devourers had built their empire on interconnected conversion systems that shared information and resources across thousands of light years. That network became their weakness as the virus propagated through every node, every ship, every facility they had ever constructed. In less than 6 hours, the entire Devourer civilization was extinct. The surviving ships of the Galactic Fleet floated in the aftermath of their victory, watching as Devourer constructs throughout the void simply shut down and began to decompose. The viral weapon had been more effective than anyone had dared hope. "We won," Admiral Veltar announced over the fleet communications. His voice carried no joy, only exhausted relief. But victory had come at a terrible cost. 3/4 of the fleet was destroyed. The survivors would spend days collecting escape pods and counting their dead. Entire species had lost half their military forces in a single battle, and the weapon that had saved them violated every principle of civilized warfare. "Captain," Dr. Vasquez said quietly, studying her readings from the destroyed Nexus, "there's something you need to know about the virus." Voss turned to look at her, noting the expression of scientific fascination mixed with horror on her face. "It's still active," she continued, "and it's not just targeting Devourer technology anymore. It's beginning to adapt to other forms of biomechanical integration." The implications were clear. The weapon that had saved the galaxy could potentially target any civilization that used biological components in their technology. Which was most of them. "How long do we have?" Voss asked. "Unknown. Maybe years, maybe decades. But eventually it will learn to target normal biological systems. When that happens," she didn't need to finish. When that happened, the virus would become a threat to all organic life in the galaxy. 3 months later, Captain Voss stood in the council chambers aboard Harmony's Edge, listening to the same aliens who had begged for human help now debate what to do about the human presence in their galaxy. "They saved us," argued Ambassador Zeth Kara, her crystal form still showing stress fractures from the war. "We cannot simply ask them to leave now that the crisis has passed." "They changed us," countered Representative Ulan. "Look at our military forces. Look at our tactics. We fight like barbarians now because they taught us how." Admiral Chen had sent her response to the Galactic Council's polite suggestion that human forces return to Earth. "You asked for our help when you needed it. Don't expect us to disappear now that the job is done." Human bases were being established throughout former Devourer territory. Human research teams were studying the remains of the conversion nexus, learning from technology that most aliens preferred to forget. Human military advisors were permanently stationed with alien fleets, teaching them tactics that would have been considered war crimes before the war. "The question," said Warsinger Thexdal during one heated council session, "is whether we are more afraid of becoming like humans or of facing our next enemy without them." It was a question that divided the galaxy. Some species welcomed humanity's full integration into galactic civilization, believing that their unconventional thinking would be valuable for future challenges. Others argued that humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too willing to use methods that civilized beings should not employ. The debate continued for months, but the practical reality was already settled. Humanity had proven that they belonged in the galaxy through the most basic argument possible. They had saved it when no one else could. Captain Voss returned to the Blood and Thunder, which had been repaired and upgraded with technology that combined human engineering with alien materials. His crew had been decorated by a dozen different species, honored as heroes of the war. But late at night, when the ship was quiet and the stars shone through the bridge windows, he sometimes wondered about the price they had paid for victory. Dr. Vasquez's viral weapon was still out there, slowly adapting, slowly learning to target new forms of life. Someday it might become the very threat they had fought to prevent. "No regrets?" Sergeant Santos asked, joining him at the observation window.